We're even on Pandora.
Wow, I don't even know what that is.
Hello, Stellar community. Welcome to the Stellar Podcast, episode 23. Today we are going to be doing a news episode. I know you'd forgotten we ever had news, but there's just been so many other things going on, exciting things. But now it's finally time to get back. We've got Colton in the house, ready to cover the most exciting, latest and greatest Stellar news. Before we get into it, though, I'm just going to cover a couple of housekeeping items. Some hashtag ads. Next week, Tuesday at 2 p.m., I'm actually giving a SEP24 workshop. So if you go to stellar.org/events, you can sign up to attend that. We'll be going over what SEP24 is, this idea of on and off ramps. So how do you get from outside the Stellar ecosystem with value into the Stellar ecosystem? You get into that through anchors. So you take your USD at your Chase Bank and find a way somehow to get it into Stellar. That happens through anchor services, through the Stellar ecosystem proposal number 24, this interoperable way that everybody follows to get value in and out of the ecosystem. So we're going to talk through that. We're actually going to do some coding. So it should be a good time. Make sure if you're able to jump in on that workshop. It's also going to be recorded, so it will be a valuable asset for years to come. The other thing I want to call out is actually a project running on Stellar Battle right now. Lightmint is running a Stellar Battle for some content that they're wanting help on. So Stellar Battle was a Stellar Community Fund entry a few rounds back, and they've got this Stellar Battle that Lightmint is running. So make sure and go over there if you're able to contribute, and also maybe start your own Stellar Battle. It's this idea of creating some sort of challenge or objective that yourself or maybe your company wants, and creating a prize pool for others to contribute to or to compete in. So a really great way to sort of incentivize communities to contribute to bug bounties or content or open source code, different things like that. So be sure and check that out, stellarbattle.com. There's a nice Lightmint battle going on right now that we wanted to call out. Colton, welcome. You want to cover maybe some Protocol 13 stuff. So we had Protocol 13 vote, I think it was last week. And let's talk a little bit about that. What is a protocol upgrade? How did it go? What did it include? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, sure. But before we do that, I want to rewind a little bit. And you said at one point that they should be surprised that we have news in the ecosystem, but they shouldn't, because there's this amazing newsletter that gets released every week. It's written by some guy, but it's called the Dev Digest. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this.
Every single Monday, this thing goes out, and it covers everything that's going on in the Stellar ecosystem. So this episode is actually based on, I think, digest number 47 and number 48. So if you want more details about any of the news we cover,
how does it feel to almost have a year's worth of Dev Digest? That's insane.
Yeah, I know, it is insane. I don't know why people keep reading it. Maybe because it's so awesome. But yeah, probably. I don't know. It's been pretty cool. It's also evolved a lot since the beginning. So like started off with a guy named Rob was writing it, and then I kind of adopted it, and now it's kind of like just evolved over time to be, I think, more human readable. For a while it was really long and like not super digestible. So we've kind of, I don't know, we've narrowed it down a lot to a pretty readable, a digestible digest, if you know what I mean.
Yes, okay, if you are not subscribed to that, make sure and add your email to that list, because it is a very good place to keep up with the latest and greatest Stellar news on a weekly basis in readable form.
The next big piece of news is that the Vibrant, formerly known as Vega, early beta is launched. So Tyler, if you want to introduce Vibrant, or Vega, now Vibrant, to anybody who may not have heard of it.
Sure. So at our Meridian conference last year, we pulled the curtain on an application that we're building on internally, which was then known as codename Vega, but has been rebranded as Vibrant. And it's a dollar savings application aimed particularly at Latin America. So there's this hyperinflation which goes on in many countries throughout the world, but our focus right now with this particular application is Latin America. And so the idea is we've got to have a method. We're providing a method for taking a very volatile native currency and taking that value and moving it into a stable currency. So from Argentinian pesos to US dollars, for example. And we're simply providing that platform. So the concept is very simple, but there are many, many players involved in that scenario. So not only our application developers to make that happen, but also our ecosystem of anchors, which are providing on and off ramps. So like I said, we're going to be doing that SEP24 talk. That SEP24 is a huge piece of this, as well as a couple other Stellar ecosystem proposals. Stellar is an interconnected web of interoperability. So you've got all these different players providing different monetary services. And when you start to tie those things together, you can build incredibly powerful and groundbreaking applications and services, which simply weren't possible without Stellar. So, but still, like, somebody has to tie those together. So that's what Vibrant is aiming to do. Tie some of these anchor services together into a dollar savings application where you can make payments. You can have the on and off ramps between different banks and stablecoin issuers. So it's in early beta, so you can get on and start testing it. And then over time, as we iterate on feedback, it will eventually reach to a stable release. But it's just incredibly exciting to see the team here at SDF iterate on this thing, build on this thing, all the interworkings between all the different teams at SDF, engineering and design and product and legal, to make this thing actually work, to kind of drink our own Kool-Aid, if you will, of does Stellar actually work? When you have all this interoperability, how does it actually feel to begin tying these things together and to fill in missing pieces with SEPs or caps, and at the end of the day, come out with a product that the world can use and make benefit from? It's incredible.
I agree. And also, it's worth noting, this hasn't only been an SDF effort, right? There are players in the ecosystem that have helped, usher this thing along, especially the anchors that are involved. And I'm looking at the currency list right now in the app, and it supports US dollars, Argentine pesos, Brazilian real, and of course, lumens. So if any of those currencies are relevant to you in any way, of course, we highly recommend you check it out. You can go to vibrant.cash to get a little more information about the application, and then, of course, find links to download it on iOS and Android. And I want to re-emphasize the fact that it is still in early beta. So testing here is extremely important, and then reporting your feedback where possible is extremely important. You can either report that to me. You can find Kyle on Keybase, who is helping spearhead this thing. You can tell it to Tyler. Whoever you have easy access to, let them know your feedback. We, of course, want to make sure this thing works as well as possible for anybody who uses it, and we can only do that through feedback. And so, of course, after a lot of iteration, there will eventually be a full release, and then it'll be open, to the mass public for use. I do want to dive in a little bit into what it's actually for and the users it serves, and you kind of touched on it a little more. But I think one thing we take for granted, especially in the United States, is how stable our own currency is. And so it's important to kind of understand this from an outside perspective. And maybe sometimes it's like hard to wrap your head around the fact that sometimes in other countries, like, they don't manage their currencies as well. And it turns into this thing where, like, you see your savings start to dwindle over time. And of course, this isn't optimal because it pushes you to either make risky investments to make up for it, or it pushes you to hoard cash instead of use it in a way that's more productive. So Vibrant is trying to solve this type of issue, right? Where people who live in countries, no fault of their own, of course, need a way to protect their money. And so if you can create an application that leverages different financial systems across the world to do that, then you have this really powerful tool that can help people sort of protect the one thing that can provide for their family, or protect the one thing that that can help them buy groceries next week, or whatever, right? Like, it's really cool to see a tool like this pop up and make use of Stellar. It's really cool to see SDF and the other ecosystem players who are helping build this thing kind of come together and work on something that has a lot of real world value.
Yeah, I think that's something that's not maybe talked about quite enough in ecosystem development that I've been realizing more and more, is that there are different tiers in building up an ecosystem. You're not focused solely on enterprise. You're not focused solely on solo entrepreneurs or brand new businesses. You need both, but they both have different levels of risk tolerance. You need both enterprises and solo entrepreneurs and new ideas and high risk development going on to create a sustainable, long-term, high-value ecosystem. But an enterprise isn't going to just jump into something like this. Somebody kind of has to pave the way first, and that's where our team, the ecosystem team, really plays a very strong role, is identifying and supporting and coming alongside those individuals and teams which are willing to take on higher risk than others will. Either they can afford to, they have the time to, they've got the expertise, they have a passion for it. There's lots of different reasons that somebody would be interested to kind of be the first mover in an ecosystem or in something new. But those are incredibly valuable, essential entities to have, because they prove viability to enterprises. And whether that's just through successful businesses or in showing how something doesn't work and providing documentation and open source software to kind of kickstart development, so there's not such a burden. Like, a lot of the risk isn't like, what is risk, right? Some of it's, I don't want to waste my time. Some of it's, I don't want to waste my money. Some of it is, I don't want to open myself up to legal liability. There's lots of different risk involved at an enterprise level. And each one of those can be answered and mitigated through those who are willing to take that risk, who can afford to shoulder that burden at whatever level they're comfortable. But you need both, and they both help each other. They both support each other, where enterprises can build on top of these sort of first mover applications and services, but then also they feed back in. So not only do they take from that and build on top of those efforts, but they also can feed back into it with funding and R&D development to push back into and to hire out of and to acquire those types of services. They both are symbiotic, I think, and I think we would do well to remember that and to build for that and to think through how this is a symbiotic relationship. We do need both, and we're not competing against each other, or two completely separate use cases within an ecosystem. They're both working towards a similar goal of utilizing this tool and making use of it. But one does kind of come before the other, if you will. And somebody has to be the first mover. And once you understand that they are symbiotic, you can kind of build for that idea of, okay, as we're starting to build services and as we are starting to prove use case, we need to take that to enterprises and say, this is how it works. It does work. It works in this way. Kind of writing the manual, if you will, and then sharing that with those who would be willing to use it. I think that's a huge part of building an ecosystem on both sides, to recognize that there are two really quite different entities here, but they're both incredibly important, but they're not separate. They do feed on each other. They are separate, but they feed on each other. They help each other. It's a symbiotic relationship, not a separate one.
100%. I agree. And to wrap it back around, if you want to check it out, vibrant.cash, it'll have a download link for iOS and Android. You can download the app, check it out, give us your feedback, play with it. As always, just let us know what you think. There's no way to improve it without feedback. So this is what this beta is for. Moving on into talking about higher risk or people who are willing to take higher risk. Stellar Community Fund Round 5 is going on right now. So maybe you can touch on that a little bit, and we'll dive into the different phases and what phase we're currently in.
Sure. So the Stellar Community Fund is a community fund. So it's the idea that the Stellar community, has the opportunity to identify projects within the ecosystem which are worthy of receiving a decent amount of funding. So the iterations, we're in round 5 now, so it's been going on for more than a year. But but we've been iterating on it quite a lot over each round. So what it was a year ago is very different than what it is now, but currently there are several different phases. The first one is just a submission phase where anyone in the ecosystem is welcome to submit an entry to put their name in the hat for future phases, right? So we just got done with the entry phase or the submission phase where all the entries come in. And then we do the ecosystem team does a preliminary comb through of that list just to make sure that all the entries are on topic, on point, within the parameters and set goals of the Stellar Community Fund. And then it moves into a discussion phase. And that's the phase we just entered on Monday, where for 4 weeks, the ecosystem, the community just talks through all the projects and we evaluate them. We can't emphasize this enough, and it's in the name, but I think it's worth reiterating again and again and again. This is a community fund. It's not up to the SDF to pick which projects should win. It's a community fund. Like, it's up to you to go in and evaluate these projects, to click on their links, to read their text, to test their apps, and then to provide your feedback to the projects that you find interesting. You don't have to evaluate all of them. Like, if you can, fantastic. But click on the ones that are interesting to you, that kind of catch your eye, and then actually follow through, and don't just provide, negative feedback and all the things that are wrong or could be improved, but also really highlight the positives. We're trying to encourage each other, and that's something our ecosystem is good at, but can also continue to grow in, is encouraging one another and being welcoming to new participants. We've got a lot of new faces in this round, which is super exciting because Colton and I have made a lot of efforts towards getting new people into the ecosystem, but it's important that we provide them a safe space to iterate and grow, and not to smack them down, but to build them up and to be helpful with criticism so that they can build better projects and to fix bugs and to understand more technical aspects of building an application that utilizes Stellar. So it's super exciting. I think we've got 25 projects right now that are in the discussion phase. So it's time to comb through those and talk through those. And then after the discussion phase, we enter a nomination phase where we take those projects which have made it to that point, and by community vote, we narrow it down to 8. So it's opened up. There's a voting page, stellarcommunity.fund, which will open up, and all the projects will be there, and you can select at least 3 and up to 8 different projects that you think are deserving of being in the final 8. And so that goes on for a week, and then there's a 1-week break period where we work through the votes and make sure there's been no manipulation or what have you. And then after that break period, the final week of final votes opens up, and that's when we take our 3 million lumens. So every Stellar Community Fund, there's 3 million lumens in the prize pool. And those 3 million lumens are split by vote amongst the final 8 projects. So you go back in and you vote for the projects 1, 2, and 3 that you think should receive the majority of the pool. And then by vote percentage, that 3 million lumens is split up amongst the 8 projects. So that's the Stellar Community Fund. It's really exciting to have made it this far, and to continue iterating and have feedback both on projects but also on the fund itself. Community fund, right? So it's up to the community to decide what the community fund should be and to provide feedback on improvements that should be made or could be made to make it a better fund. It's I think I've found, like, both Colton and I over the course of running this fund and iterating and trying to decide what the right rules are for it. It's hard. It's not an easy thing to do, to create a fund. It's a lot more difficult to give away money than we thought it might be. But there are good ways to do it. And it's through helpful criticism and critique to find the problems and address them in the right way, to build a fund that works for everybody and doesn't favor certain projects over others, or at least has a common goal and all the rules are pointing towards that common goal, and certain individuals or certain projects aren't favored over others. It's not easy, but when you have that community aspect working towards that singular goal, it's amazing to see it actually work and to see entries which are right for this fund, and to see people and projects receive the funding that they need to continue to build on and improve their projects. And to over time see those projects stick around. And like Stellar Battle, Enlightenment, and other projects that kind of have participated in the Stellar Community Fund and have won funds, and to see them continue and get better and come back and provide feedback and just become ingrained members of the community. It's awesome.
Epic sales pitch. But yeah, revisiting the different rounds, I want to throw in some dates. That way people can kind of get their bearings a little bit. So on May 25th, these submissions actually opened. And on June 22nd, which was that yesterday?
That was yesterday.
Yeah,
which we're recording this on the 23rd.
We're recording this on the 23rd. So on June 22nd, the submissions closed. And of course, discussion phase opens. That ends on July 20th when the nominations open. So when nominations open, you begin voting for which projects are going to make it to the final round, as Tyler explained. And then on July 27th, the nominations close. August 3rd, the final vote begins. And then August 10th, the final vote finishes. So those are the dates. You can also find those on the Galactic Talk post. You can find those on the Dev Digest number 48. The dates are everywhere. We'll make sure they're constantly posted everywhere so people can kind of know where they're at within the rounds. But also, going back to the point of feedback and making sure that you participate in the discussion, it's extremely, extremely, extremely important. But also, it doesn't have to be feedback either, right? It could be questions. If something's not immediately obvious about a proposal, or if you're not sure how something works, or maybe what the end goal is, questions are just as important as direct feedback. It's important for the community so they can understand. It's important for you so you can understand. But it's also important for the person submitting the project so that they know what is confusing about their project, and they can better answer certain concerns or questions that the community has. And that kind of benefits everybody. So when people go to vote and they're digging through the proposals, they could see questions that they might have answered. They could see feedback. They could see the project responding to feedback. It kind of helps literally everybody involved. And of course, you do not have to go through all 20 plus projects that are submitted. I don't think that's sustainable, or it might even be possible considering some people's schedules. But of course, just pick a few that you like. And if everybody picks a few that they like, eventually everybody gets poked, and everybody has feedback somewhere. So that's kind of all we're saying. We're not saying you have to spend your whole week digging through all of these. Just the ones you have time to do, please go through them, ask any questions, give any feedback that you have, because it literally helps everybody. Because we want people to be able to make the best voting decisions they possibly can, so we can optimize the voting process and we can optimize distribution at the end. And yeah, of course, I'll say it again, it helps everybody if you just even participate a little. So time you have, we would greatly appreciate it. The community would end up appreciating it, and of course, the projects would greatly appreciate it.
Yep, and I also think it's worth pitching too that tell your friends this is a great place to get money for projects that are involved with payments. So we want to see more and more new faces joining the SCF, both as participants but also voters. So continue to spread the word. We've all got people that are, they have that great app idea they want to build. So make sure to continue to spread the good word about the Stellar Community Fund. Maybe we'll do something a little different here, because it's something I've been thinking a lot about. There's obvious incentives to be an entrant in the Stellar Community Fund, but what are some of the advantages? Like, what are some of the draws, or what are some ways that we could better incentivize and draw in voter participation? So I'll query that question to Colton, but also, we've got quite a few listeners on this podcast. Our Keybase usernames. My email address. And if you don't, it's in the description. Maybe reach out with some ideas that we have around how to grow our votership. What are some reasons that people would or might or do or could participate as voters and reviewers of the Stellar Community Fund? So I have some ideas. I'll share those after. Colton, maybe you have some ideas around that. Get people's brains turning. But this would be kind of interesting just to see if there's some ideas around how to get community involvement as voters.
I won't respond directly with an answer because, of course, we don't have the answers. I'll kind of just continue to extend the question. So as for voter incentives, I think the obvious ones are, as a community member, it's important that you feel like you're contributing to, or at least, in my opinion, and in my experience, like it's important to feel like I'm contributing to the success of a project that I find interesting, and I can do that through my vote. It would be cool to explore different incentive mechanisms, such as, like, would something like an NFT per round be interesting? Would as members of the community, would you guys be interested in receiving an NFT? Maybe more feedback about the outcome of your vote. Would you like to see, um, more incentives? I don't even know. I'm kind of running out of ideas at the top of my head, but what would be something that would make you be like, oh yeah, that was awesome that I participated in this round, because we understand, like, there can be a lot of time going into your voting decision. We understand that voting in two rounds can be kind of tiring sometimes. There's a lot of projects to go through. It's easy to forget the dates. We're talking about it all the time, so we want to make sure that one, the incentives between participants, voters, and the SCF are all aligned. But we also want to make sure that it feels rewarding to be a voter. We want to make sure it feels rewarding to participate on every side of the coin here. So yeah, I mean, going back to the original question, I don't have any direct answers, but I would love to just continue to extend the question and throw some ideas out there and see what other people think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the NFT, the non-fungible token, basically just be like a participation token. Like, I voted in. I mean, it's kind of like that sticker you get at the ballot box, right? I voted. It'd be something like that, kind of a little clout item. Like, I participated in this specific SCF round. I also think, like, again, the reason I vote would be because there are projects that I want to see succeed, and accountability into those projects, making sure they actually carry through, as well as just outcome, like, how is this project doing, how much did they receive, having more real-time access into how my vote, I guess, is being used, or where my vote went, or how it affected the outcome. Those kinds of insights, I think, would be neat to see. I don't know how effective they might be, but as listeners, as stellar participants yourselves, it would be really interesting, like, why do you vote, and what are ways that we could increase voter participation and make voting feel like the important thing that it is. I mean, at the end of the day, if we don't have voters, or if the voters don't feel like their vote counts, then why do we have a community fund? And I think the community aspect is incredibly important, but making sure that our entrants are not the only entity that's kind of appreciated and rewarded, but also seeing the voters not just as a utility to allocate funds, but as major participants. They're winners too, because they participated and voted and helped allocate the funds in the appropriate way. So maybe just some ideas around that. And I think we have some ideas that we're willing to try, but would love any feedback or expansion of those ideas, as well as just general feedback on the entire program, and ways that we can improve and make it better as a funding mechanism for the goals that it has.
Yeah. So I guess two questions we would leave everybody with are, why do you vote, and how can we, further empower that reason?
Exactly. Cool. Because I mean, the SCF's awesome, but I think it could be way more awesome if we think about it seriously. I mean, at current Lumen rates, it's close to $1 million a year that we're giving out in the SCF. And that means something. That's a lot of cash that can really bootstrap development and continue development and see projects grow and be sustained. But only if we build the right system for it, only if we get the right projects in and reward the right projects with the correct amount of lumens. So making sure that that's happening and ensuring that the program is working. And I think that happens by us thinking seriously about it. So we're paid and full-time, employees at the SDF to make sure that happens, but it's a community fund. So we need feedback and we need to iterate to make sure that those people who want to participate, either as entrants or as voters, are actually getting the right value out of it, so that the value that we have available to us through the SDF is actually being distributed correctly. Because as we mentioned, it's not easy, but I think we can do it.
Agree.
All right, super duper. Well, that's all on my list. Anything to add or leave our listeners with, Colton?
Yeah, I think that's all as far as news goes. So if you guys want to keep up with, well, first off, if you want to keep up with the podcast, we have podcast.stellar.org where you can catch all of the audio versions. We're also on Spotify. Are we on Apple? Are we on everything?
We're on everything, right? Dude. If you go podcast.stellar.org and there's a little button like listen on other things, we're everywhere.
That's amazing.
We're even on Pandora.
Wow. I don't even know what that is. No, I'm just kidding. We're also on YouTube. We every once in a while, I think the schedule is once a month. We're hosting sort of live podcasts on there. The goal is to either one give a live presentation or have a guest on. And the most recent one was, of course, I mentioned earlier in the episode, our head of ecosystem, Justin, who gets to tell me and Tyler what to do. So if you want to listen to that, go check that out. But otherwise, if you're just trying to keep up with Stellar News, you can go to twitter.com/stellar.org. We post there all the time. Our Twitter is super active. You can also, check out the Reddit, r/stellar. You can go to stellar.org if you want to find just documentation, anything like that. And then, Keybase. if you want to find people to talk to, collaborate with, there's the big Stellar Keybase channel. It has 14,000 people in it. There's a dev discussion channel. There's a random channel. There's a general channel. There's all kind of channels in there. But there's also smaller groups like Stellar Global, where some of our more active community members sort of aggregate and have productive discussions. So there's a couple of places on Keybase you could check out if you want to get more involved in the Stellar ecosystem.
Awesome. Yep. We're also trying to continue to grow our podcast, both on iTunes and Simplecast, where we're hosting, and our YouTube. So as you're able, share links on what social media networks you have, and leave us a review if you have the time. That would be awesome. We would really appreciate that to continue to spread the news about Stellar and the different interviews that we do. It's a good show. I've enjoyed doing it, and we'd love to continue to get the word out there. So take your part as you're able to continue to spread the show, and we appreciate it.
And we're not biased. It really is. It's just a great show. Amazing show, actually.
It's fantastic. It's unbelievably amazing.
Leave a thumbs up, please. Thank you.
For more information about Stellar and the future of decentralized finance, visit stellar.org. And get involved in the discussion in one of our active communities on Keybase at stellar.public or Stellar Stack Exchange. Until next time, I'm your host, Tyler Vanderhoeven. We'll catch y'all later.